I doubt you've seen a countertop like this. Did you know there's a way to make super realistic looking plastic laminate countertops? It gets rid of those stupid black seam lines, which is perfect for those damn light color laminates. And you know what else? It's super simple, cheap, and easy to make. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to professionally make a countertop like this. But why would you make countertops this way? I've built literally hundreds of different countertops over the years and probably made all the mistakes making them along the way. I mean, all of them. And as a
Oh
result, I can see there are
no.
definitely some advantages to making countertops this way, such as it's super realistic with no black laminate lines or seams. Any grain or pattern is going to roll over the edges, giving it a realistic look. Less seams for water penetration. It's an extremely fast method of building countertops. It's DIY friendly, much lighter and easier to manage than granite or quartz, especially by yourself. And the best of all, it's super affordable compared to granite or quartz countertops. Essentially, all plastic laminate countertops start with a substrate core that I typically make out of doubled up 11/16 inches thick material, making it an overall thickness of 1 3/8 or a metric 35 millimeters. You will also need your plastic laminate that will be cut out of a 4x8 sheet or 5x12 sheet, depending on the size of your countertop. You will also need to cut your laminate to size, but before you do that, you must cut your laminate bigger than your substrate when you're gluing. For example, my top has 3 finished edges on front and 2 sides, and the thickness of the top is 35 millimeters or 1 3/8. So I must allow a minimum of about 1 5/8 extra on any finished sides and an extra 1/4 inch on any unfinished sides, which will make more sense why in a moment. And with that out of the way, you're going to do something a little odd and take your laminate and lay it face side down on a really flat clean surface and lay your countertop face side down on the laminate and place it exactly where you want it to be sitting, like I did. Take a pencil and trace out your top where your finished edges will be, and grab a roll of masking tape, preferably one that's wider than your bullnose, and mask off all your finished edges like this. Trust me on this. Now get the substrate out of the way, and this is super important. Leave the tape on the laminate. You gotta get your surfaces perfectly clean before glue. That means wiping it off better than some of you wipe off your ass. You know who you are. On to gluing. To get your laminate glued to your substrate, you will have to use contact cement. I'm using a spray-on version, which is meant more for industrial use and to pretend to be Spider-Man. But for the rest of you, it's probably more practical to buy a gallon or quart of contact cement that you can use a paint roller and just roll it on. Whatever the case, and pay attention to this because it is super important, you absolutely must apply the glue to both surfaces, your substrate and your plastic laminate. This is also super critical. If you've never worked with contact cement before, it's unlike any other glue. You must apply it and let it dry so that there is absolutely no wet glue. You can test this by touching it. No glue should come off your fingers like this. It's also super important to remove the masking tape we put on earlier before you go any further, or you're gonna have problems. Just don't let the tape touch your cement as you remove it, because as a wise man by the name of Jay-Z once said, you're gonna have 99 problems but a bitch ain't one. Now riddle me this. How do we get that laminate glued down on the substrate and perfectly line it up with our pencil marks from before without the two surfaces touching? Well, let me show you. And no, you are not going to be a heathen and wing it and hope for the best. That would be incredibly dumb, dummy. Instead, we're going to use sticks. Yes, sticks. Clean sticks. Mind you, something long enough to span the width of your top and enough of them to lay out on your substrate, spaced out every 4 to 6 inches like this. And very carefully, unlike how I just did it, you will gently lay down your laminate on the sticks without having it touch the countertop below it. And now comes the hardest part, bending over. Help! Help! Just doesn't get any easier with age, kids. But seriously, you will need to position your top on the table so you can look underneath it to line up the unglued edges or your pencil marks with the edges of your top. And if everything is all good, you can go ahead and stick the laminate down. I like to start in the middle. You may need some help with this on a longer top, but just be sure that you don't miss removing any sticks before pressing it together, because you won't be able to pull things apart and fix this. Don't ask me how I know. If you can get a hold of a little roller like this, that would be great, because now you need to roll out the laminate to make sure it's stuck properly to the substrate. Although you need to be aware of one little thing, and that's not to roll over the edges and crack your laminate, or else it's game over at this point. You can probably put some masking tape on it to remind you to stop before this point, or something along this line, but just don't forget to stop, damn it. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Oh no.
Now, I know you're ready to get on to the miter fold, but there is one last thing we must do. First, you need to grab yourself some thicker tape, something like this, and run the tape all the way along the edges you are planning to miter fold. Being sure to keep the tape roughly lined up halfway, overlapping where the substrate edge meets the overhanging plastic laminate. And when this is done, we will flip the countertop over one more time so the laminate side is face down. Earlier, I told you it was super important that we masked off some of the edges, not to get any glue on it. And here's why. We needed the laminate to remain clean and free of glue and any debris that would stick to the glue, so we can run this nifty little tool across all the edges. This tool is going to get us our miter fold cut into our laminate perfectly accurate. This tool is basically a laminate trimmer with a small, straight 1/8 inch fluting bit, which has a base plate that allows the trimmer to operate on an angle, in this case 45 degrees. The trick with this is to set the blade to cut almost all the way through the laminate, leaving very little material left behind, so that you'll be able to fold things over without having any gaps. Once you have the depth set properly, maybe test this out on a scrap. Just run this down the countertop counterclockwise all the way around on your finished edges, being careful to hold this down flat to the laminate. The other trick you need to be aware of is on any outside corners, you must run your rubber past any overhanging laminate like this. Just be sure to keep it straight. If you can't, try clamping a board to the edge and running along it. And when you get all your edges and corners cut, you will need to take a sharp knife and cut out the extra little square like this. You won't need it. As you can see, you should now be able to move the edges freely. So it's glue time again. Again, you're going to use some contact cement on the edges. Or, in my case, I'm going to quick spidey blast it one more time. But there are some things you need to know. It never hurts to double glue the substrate edge, meaning once the contact adhesive dries, roll on a second coat. The glue always soaks up on the end grain and can definitely use the second coat. I like to take a little Type on 3 and run a bead of it right in the corner where my miter fold will be, for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that this will make sure your top stay watertight and last a long time. Sometimes when folding the edges or when cutting the miter, the laminate might happen to open up, and this will keep it sealed. Also, it's going to give a much stronger glue joint when dry versus just relying on the contact cement. But what do I know? Now that it's glued, you can just go ahead and fold the laminate into place. No need for clamps, as contact cement will hold things in place. Just be sure to roll the edges out and make sure things are pressed tightly against the contact adhesive. I know you're excited to flip the top and see how the miter fold turned out, but before you flip that top over, we need to finish things off on the underside first. If you did things right, you should have a little bit of extra material to router off like this. Make sure to stop before your ends or you'll risk blowing out and chipping the laminate with your router, and nobody likes that. So to get rid of the last bit of laminate on the corners, just take a belt sander and flush things up like this. I still like going over the whole top to make sure the laminate is perfectly flush with the substrate. That's important. Just be sure that when you're belting things off, that your sanding belt is pulling in the direction toward your countertop and not pulling away from it, pulling your edge potentially off or working dust in between things. You don't want that. After belting this edge, now it is super sharp. So I like to take a block and just run over the edges with some sandpaper and remove the sharpness of the edge. Finally, with that out of the way, you have my permission to flip the top over to inspect your work. Just remove the tape that was holding your miter in place and trim off any overhanging laminate on the back edges with a flush trimmer. You will notice that this mitered edge is a little on the sharp side. So what I like to do is again take a block and some sandpaper and run over all the edges to remove the sharp. But you should be able to run a finger along the edge without slicing it. Just be a little careful not to tip your sanding block too much and mark the face of your plastic laminate. Obviously you could use this method on countertops, but is that it? Is that the only application for this method? And of course the answer is no. You could use this for other items like backsplashes. I made a simple one for this top that looked and worked great. Just use the exact same process on this. If you have the material and pre-planned it properly, you can even get the grain lined up with the countertop. You can also use this with wood veneers and making things like shelves or end panels. This would be a great option. I'm sure there's much more you could use this for when the situation comes up. Hey, you got your countertop made. Cool, awesome, congrats. However, I did say there was some disadvantages to this method, and it is important to know what they are. One less obvious but somewhat huge limitation to this method is that you will be limited to only doing square or rectangular shaped countertops. Anything with multiple angles or inside corners won't work, or might not work that well. I did use this technique on a countertop with an inside corner, but I had to make an extra seam on it and discovered there were some additional steps to be done. The other issue is that because your corners will be 90 degrees, they will be a lot sharper than other options like a beveled edge or other glue on edging. The final drawback is there is one specialty tool that you will probably need to purchase to be able to make tops this way, and that's the laminate trimmer from Betterly. It's a chunk of change for a single small top like this, but for a bigger project or multiple projects, it's reasonable in price. Now, that making plastic laminate countertops look super realistic is a trick that you have up your sleeve. There are some other tricks I can teach you, like how to install tricky drawer fronts that you can't get a clamp on, or how to miter two different size boards together and make them fit perfectly. Or even better, make sure to like and subscribe and check out my channel for other videos that you might find super helpful. Thanks for watching.